Part 1 of the Ethical and Religious Directives focuses on the social responsibility of Catholic healthcare services. The introduction to Part 1 identifies the fundamental values that should characterize the identity of Catholic healthcare, that is, its character or culture, as well as guide its decision-making and what it does. We'll begin this section with a video featuring ministry leaders speaking about our social responsibility and what it means to them. You'll then have the opportunity to read sample case studies and answer questions based on directives from Part 1. If at all possible, please review Part 1 of the directives before starting the section.
Healthcare is to promote and to protect human dignity. Healthcare is to contribute to the common good. Catholic healthcare is to have a preferential option for the poor. Catholic healthcare is to witness to a responsible stewardship of limited healthcare resources.
Breaking down barriers and bringing care to people in need is a profound way of fulfilling the social responsibility of Catholic healthcare. This responsibility is explored in Part 1 of the Ethical and Religious Directives, developed by the bishops of the United States for the people who serve in Catholic health organizations.
Part 1 is the real kickoff for the ERDs and sets the stage for the other 5 chapters, if you would. And what it does is lay out some principles like the sacredness of human life and the common good. But it also talks about the commitment to the poor and universal access and many of the things that are currently hot topics that physicians are engaging in discussion with their neighbors and colleagues and so on.
The directives are rooted in normative principles that guide the Church's health ministry as it responds to social needs.
The fact that I am a human being means I have dignity, I have worth, I have value. My life is significant simply because I am.
It can be sometimes as simple as making sure that they're getting bathed every day, they're getting changed every day, that someone is coming in and sometimes just saying good morning, good evening, good afternoon, acknowledge who they are. That gives them more respect as a person, gives them dignity instead of just saying this patient, or this illness, or that illness.
At the heart of Catholic social teaching and the ethical and religious directives is the belief in the dignity of every person.
The ERDs, in my mind here, are designed to frame that discussion. What are those constitutive elements of Catholic identity that would suggest to us that we have a specific role to serve in the community? Bringing forth that mission that Christ started means that we serve our community in a very specific fashion. And that if we believe that inherent to human dignity is that healthcare is a right for all persons, that foundational aspect of human dignity means that all persons ought be accorded equitable access to the healthcare services that are in accord with their human dignity. So that framework really helps us to establish how we're going to serve those most in need, how we're going to bring that which is in accord with human dignity to God's people as a whole, and how we do that without creating disparity, without creating healthcare that's rationed by class, to offer equitable access to healthcare that isn't rationed by exclusion, to be able to modify existing policy that does create perhaps a perception of access, but when delivery is actually necessary, doesn't have the infrastructure there to do so. That really drives us as Catholic healthcare and needs to be those set of core commitments that we can maintain a faithfulness to.
Care for the poor distinguishes Catholic healthcare.
The Catholic identity piece, I think, is really more on the positive side. What are the things that we do that brings compassion into the world, that creates partnerships where we are about serving the poor and the marginalized, where that we want to be about the social questions of our day and responding to those who are poor and marginalized. To me, I think that's one of the beauties of the ethical and religious directives. And the challenge for us to find those in our communities who want to be about alleviating the suffering of those who are on the margins, to advocating for change because it's unjust to leave those who are uninsured. So that we create those partnerships where we want to be about bringing people to wholeness and to be about the struggle for a more humane world. That, to me, is the beauty of the ethical and religious directives and the beauty of creating partnerships. So we're about doing more, not about that part of us that we have to put kind of a fence around.
I think that guidance that the Catholic healthcare system gives us reminds us daily that we're here to help those that cannot help themselves, and we take that very seriously.
Catholic healthcare strives to enhance the common good within society.
Catholic healthcare recognizes that healthy individuals make for healthy communities, and healthy communities make for healthy children, healthy living, and that we can be a part of that mix.
Responsible stewardship of human and financial resources is a commitment of Catholic healthcare.
Stewardship is recognizing very basically that everything that we have comes from God, and that God has given tremendous gifts to us, and we have the responsibility to care for those gifts, to use them well for ourselves, but also to use them for one another, and use them ultimately to build up the human community. So that when we speak in terms of stewardship, we're not talking only about money.
I think most people understand that both in terms of human resources, physical resources, financial resources, almost everything we deal with, those resources are finite. They are not unending and overabundant in their supply. And so there is a responsibility for us as the recipients of these gifts to shepherd them, to protect them, to maintain them, to be able to pass them along to the next generation that follow in our footsteps. That may be the next generation literally, or it may just be the people who succeed us in our positions in Catholic healthcare. But we want to hand on to them this collection of time and talent and treasure in whatever fashion that is, so that they have the same ability to carry on that we were given by virtue of these gifts. If we keep the stewardship idea in our minds at all times, for the most part, we are going to be coming up with some great conclusions and some great ideas about how to be faithful stewards and yet do the jobs that we're meant to do in the best way possible.
The normative principles and the directives present a moral compass guiding Catholic healthcare in today's challenging environment.
The obligation of the Catholic healthcare ministry is to understand itself as an ecclesial reality. It's an extension of the Church. It's an extension of Christ's healing mission here on earth. It is that foundational to who we are as Church.
This great service grows out of a conviction in the hearts of everyone providing Catholic healthcare service, that this is an extension of the gospel mandate. This is a participation in the healing ministry of Christ.
You have just heard about Part 1 of the Ethical and Religious Directives. In addition to the 5 fundamental values or principles that guide the Church's healing ministry, namely promote and defend human dignity, care for the poor, contribute to the common good, steward resources responsibly, and act in communion with the Church, it's also important to remember a few other things. That Catholic healthcare is a community that provides healthcare to those in need of it. That it should be marked by a spirit of mutual respect among caregivers. That Catholic healthcare should distinguish itself by service to and advocacy for the poor, the marginalized, and the vulnerable. That our workplaces ought to be just, and that all those who work in Catholic healthcare organizations should maintain professional standards and promote the institution's commitment to human dignity and the common good. Part 1 of the directives not only underscores the values that should shape who we are, but also describes the kind of organizations we should be.